Okay, hello everybody. We will get going today. I would like to welcome everybody to part 3 of the Accelerating the Implementation of Renewable Energy Project National Webinar Series. So my name is Eric Timmons. I am the project lead here at Quest. And before we get going today, I just want to draw some attention to there is a Q&A box as well as a chat box. So feel free to drop any questions that you may have throughout the presentation. I'm in either of those. I'll be monitoring them and we'll relay them to our presenters today. There will also be allotted time for questions towards the end of the session as well. So we will hopefully be able to get to everybody's session or everyone's questions for the session. I would also just like to say if you are able to update your name so that we can see it on the Zoom chat as well. That would be great. Okay. So a little background on the Accelerating the Implementation of Renewable Energy, or AIRE project. So this is a project that Quest has developed and delivered in partnership with the University of Guelph and the Community Energy Knowledge Action Partnership. And also we'd like to mention that this is through our funding partner, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. The AIRE project focuses on changing policies, changing regulations, municipal planning, and behaviors in order to enable a reduction in municipal emissions. And this project has involved mobilizing the adoption of proven technologies, processes, and practices, along with applying new ones considered innovative in the local context, with the overall goal of assisting in their implementation within our participating municipalities. So our webinar today focuses on a key piece of that process. It's around governing the implementation of community energy plans through local not-for-profit intermediaries and delivery partners. And for today, we are going to look at Our Energy Guelph as a case study. So this presentation will describe the logic upon which local not-for-profit organizations that are serving as these intermediaries can improve planning and implementation of community energy plans. So as I mentioned, Our Energy Guelph is our case study. They were established in 2018, and they will be used as a focal point to discuss the strengths, the opportunities, weaknesses, or any threats of this governance model and organization. So our presentation today will be co-delivered by Kirby Calvert, who is the chair of the board of directors at Our Energy Guelph, and Alex Chapman, who is the executive director at Our Energy Guelph. And this dual perspective will help to shed some light on the political and the technical and logistical challenges, as well as the opportunities that other municipalities or communities could consider as they work towards a similar governance model. So Kirby is an associate professor at the University of Guelph as well, where he leads CEP. As well as I mentioned, he's on the board at Our Energy Guelph. And Alex, as I mentioned, is the executive director. He holds a Bachelor of Applied Science as well as an MBA, is a certified energy manager, certified energy auditor, renewable energy professional, serves on the board of directors of PACE Canada, the Energy Task Force of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the advisory board of the Electric Autonomy Canada, is a member of the Clean Air Partnership and the Association of Energy Engineers. So suffice to say, he has a lot of free time on his hands. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. As Eric mentioned, the presentation will be co-delivered. I am going to start with some quick backstory and some of the logic and related challenges. And we'll pass it off to Alex to talk a little bit about implementation and an example of how these intermediary organizations and not-for-profits can work and the challenges that they face. I think this title wins some kind of an award for most characters or highest character count in a title. But hopefully it's descriptive and helps to give you a sense of what it is we're to talk about today. And what we're talking about is a governance innovation that we believe can accelerate the implementation of community energy plans broadly, including local renewable energy. And the category of governance innovation that we'll focus on is collaborative governance, delivered through what we're calling an intermediary organization. And by this we mean an organization that can catalyze and coordinate implementation across local government and local community. So intermediaries operate as network managers, they operate as catalysts, as backbones, as boundary crossers, and hopefully we'll help to explain what we mean by that terminology as we roll forward in the presentation. And I wanted to start with just some quick backstory, just to give you a sense of the timeline and how Our Energy Guelph all unfolded, while also communicating the logic and the challenges along the way. And so this extended timeline is just to show you that Our Energy Guelph is more than a decade in the making, and we're building on a strong legacy of community-driven action on energy and climate in the city of Guelph, starting with a community energy plan in 2006, adoption of that plan by council in 2007, and then transitioning to implementation of that initial plan in 2010. A couple of major milestones around district energy and energy efficiency programming in 2014 and 2015. And by 2016, there had been a sort of a recognition that the plan needed to be updated and needed to be modernized, so to speak. And we needed to think through what community energy planning in Guelph would look like over the next 20 to 30 years. And that's really where we will pick up the story of Our Energy Guelph. And want to make a note that as I walk through some of this backstory on how Our Energy Guelph came to be, we're going to offer some sympathetic critiques of how the relationship has been managed by both Our Energy Guelph and staff. And as a way of identifying teaching moments or what we consider to be learning moments in this process, and will hopefully be teaching moments for those of you who are thinking about establishing some version of an intermediary or some version of an Our Energy Guelph in your own community. So in 2016, as mentioned, the City Council set an update in motion, and a task force was created. About 21 of us were invited onto this task force. And very early on, the task force recognized that the community energy plan held by the municipality and with the municipality as the primary implementer might be missing some opportunities. That there needed to be some coordination across the municipality as one primary implementer and the broader network of partners that needed to be involved in the implementation of community energy planning. And so right away, the task force rebranded itself as Our Energy Guelph to position itself as an implementation partner and as a catalyst to bring together more implementation partners. And there's two insights here that I'd like to share. The first is something that we say in passing all the time, but rings true in the case of Our Energy Guelph. You need champions. You need people who are going to commit their time and dedicate their time to developing and realizing this governance innovation within their own community. We were all volunteer members after all. And what we were doing here was suggesting that we take on a much stronger role in community energy planning. It was, for many of us on the task force, myself included, I should mention I was elected as a co-chair of the task force at the time. And for many of us, it was a little easier to take on this added role because it was aligned with our existing professional missions and mandates. So there was a healthy overlap of interests already. You know, we had the utility represented. My research is in community energy. And so there's a bunch of people on the task force for whom there was a healthy overlap between their professional mandate and what we were trying to accomplish with this entity. So you need champions. But the second lesson learned here is that the narrative about the role of Our Energy Guelph in relation to the role of the municipality got away from us almost immediately. And this is one of the pitfalls or threats that I would like to call out right off the bat. Many of you may have seen this slide from a previous presentation I gave. The lesson that we learned is that there is a risk that the narrative within City Hall trends toward a minimalist perspective on the role of the municipality in CEP implementation. And so what ended up happening is that once Our Energy Guelph sort of rebranded itself and declared its intention to take on a stronger role, the municipality, and some executive staff in particular within the municipality, started to think about community energy planning and the role of the municipality in community energy planning through this minimalist perspective. That is, they started to separate corporate energy from community energy. And for sure, in the early days, we lost a lot of momentum that could have been achieved had we maintained focus on this overlap. So as one tangible example of that, we hired Alex Chapman, who's our executive director now, and he was previously the manager of the climate office at City Hall at the City of Guelph. And that role has changed title to be corporate energy and climate change. So when we're suggesting the development of an intermediary, we're by no means suggesting that we remove the municipality from the equation or that we separate the community efforts from corporate efforts. And I want to come back to that message later on as we describe more of the logic of Our Energy Guelph. So back to our timeline here. So we rebrand ourselves in 2017. And then in 2018, we presented a target to council. The task force, through a combination of community engagement and analytics, we set a target of net zero by 2050 and laid out a technical pathway through which we could achieve that target. And in 2018, we presented that to council. We wrapped the story of achieving net zero by 2050 in a compelling argument around economic development and community well-being. And ultimately, council unanimously approved that motion, that target. And they also approved a motion recognizing Our Energy Guelph as the implementer of the pathway to net zero. And this is some of the logic upon which we based our argument to City Council that they should recognize Our Energy Guelph as a primary implementer. So these are, those of you who have done a technical assessment of the pathway to your target will know that there's a laundry list of actions that need to be taken. We're highlighting 6 here that were identified by the task force, by Our Energy Guelph, as being what we consider to be priority actions, actions that we wanted to start with. And certainly some of these fall directly in the purview of the municipality. So electrifying transit, for example, stricter codes on new build. So those are things that only the municipality can do with support from provincial and federal government, of course. But others fall in a gray area, right? It's unclear exactly whose responsibility they are. They require a form of collective action and networking. And in particular, thinking about retrofitting homes and commercial buildings, which is something that Alex will speak to in more detail. When we looked across all of the technical actions that needed to be achieved, it was just very clear to us that a collaborative approach was going to be necessary. We didn't want this plan to go inside City Hall because we recognized very early on that we needed the municipality to play an outside-in approach rather than an inside-out approach. And I'll talk about that in a moment here as we roll forward. And so we advocated for a sense of shared responsibility, and on that logic, we advocated for Our Energy Guelph. And this was to give you a sense of the details of what the motion looked like that went to council. And this was developed in combination. Our Energy Guelph worked with city staff to develop some language and think about some language around this. And it's that council acknowledged the role of OEG as the implementer of the Community Energy Initiative going forward in principle. And I've underlined implementer in principle for 2 reasons. One, in principle was added as an amendment by a councillor who, showing some risk aversion here, just being very careful. This was early on in the relationship, and I think there were some councillors that didn't want to make the commitment right away. And so the in principle was a way to communicate some commitment to continue to work forward while still leaving it a bit ambiguous. And I underline implementer because it's a loaded term. Implementer suggests all kinds of things. And in actuality, Our Energy Guelph has always seen themselves as a catalyst for implementation, not necessarily as the implementer. There is no single implementer of a community energy initiative. It's kind of the philosophy upon which we're based. And so we were very happy with adding in principle, because then it added some ambiguity around this term implementer. But as Alex will talk about later, we really take our role as a catalyst very seriously. And we'll talk about exactly how that gets operationalized. So this is what the motion looked like. Council agreed. And so we formalized that eventually in a service agreement, which identified what OEG was responsible for, and also came with some funding of $700,000 over 5 years from the city. So this service agreement is in many ways a classic form of corporate innovation, right? So if a corporation finds itself in a period of disruptive change, if it finds itself overwhelmed and with a limited capacity to achieve this really grand objective, like a net zero by 2050 target, then one next step is to partner with external resources to help you achieve your objective. So in a lot of ways, this is a classic form of innovation by the city to partner with external resources. The $700,000, there's a caveat to that. There's a decision at year 2, so about 8 or 9 months from now, about whether or not that funding will continue. So, we've got to show some wins over the first 2 years in order to get the rest of that, the next 3 years of funding. And the other thing to mention is that the $700,000 didn't come from the tax base. This was, there's a lot of, they say you work hard and get lucky. And that's kind of what happened in this case, right? So the lucky bit was that at the time, our local utility, Guelph Hydro, merged with Electra, and the city received a one-time dividend of about $13 million. And the $700,000 that we received came from that dividend. And there's an important discussion coming up about the basis upon which we will be evaluated, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But what I want to do here is I lead into Alex's bit on implementation, is just to break down the philosophy upon which Our Energy Guelph is built, and the key tenets upon which we've designed ourselves. And I never want to lose sight of this fact that the municipality is still the keystone for implementation planning. Although we're suggesting that they're one partner among many implementation partners, as this graphic shows you, and this is from some research that was funded by the FCM, the municipality has direct and indirect influence over various activities that constitute major energy consumers and potential energy producers. And we need that control and that influence in order to achieve our objectives. So the municipality has to be at the center of these activities. And what we're suggesting is that the municipality take an outside-in approach. So in other words, develop relationships with a task force or with implementation partners to identify the role of the municipality, and then look inward and become internally aligned, right? So it's as opposed to internally aligning and developing internal processes and then looking outward for these partnerships. This is consistent with the way that community energy planning has been done for a while. We're not really proposing anything new here. Advisory committees and task forces are what have helped municipalities do this. What we're suggesting is that task force becomes a key basis for activity and a key basis for programming in implementation, not only in planning. It's critical to develop a meaningful action plan based on key information and data-driven initiatives. And what we're suggesting here is that we need to ensure that the plan is the community's plan for the city rather than the city's plan for the community. And one way to ensure this is to make sure that the consulting efforts and analytical efforts go through the task force rather than to the municipality directly. And this is something that we were able to achieve in the planning effort leading up to the development of Our Energy Guelph. And this is something that Our Energy Guelph continues to do, is work with consultants to figure out what develop some business cases around some key initiatives. And of course, we need to maintain a communication pipeline to the general public. Lots of conspiracy theories and lots of alternative narratives can emerge if there isn't constant communication around what the municipality is doing and what's happening in the community around energy and climate. And we need an entity to be able to maintain that communication pipeline and to be able to have conversations and say some things that municipalities can't necessarily have and can't necessarily say. And all of this helps to strengthen political resilience. It means that we are able to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more nimble in the conversations that we have. And the whole exercise isn't subject to 4-year election cycles. The other tenet is to serve as a backbone organization, to grow the pie for existing organizations. So there certainly was some concern that the development of Our Energy Guelph would lead to a situation where there would be fewer resources for other existing organizations. And what we've been able to show, in fact, is that as an entity, we are able to grow the pie by coordinating efforts, going after some funding sources that might not otherwise be possible, and in other words, serving as a backbone for organizations within the community to realize their objectives. And that's the logic upon which Our Energy Guelph is built. Our board of directors in a lot of ways reflects we're now incorporated, we have a board of directors, and that board of directors reflects the original task force in that it's composed of implementation partners, for example, the utility in the city, and some other key players, but we've also got key skills represented on the board, legal and accounting and HR. And in general, the original community energy plan serves as our strategic plan as an organization, but of course we need to translate that community energy plan into an organizational action plan, into something that a set of actions and activities that Our Energy Guelph as an organization will continue to pursue in order to drive toward that goal. And this is where I'll turn it over to Alex Chapman, who we hired as our executive director in November 2019 to share with you some insights on that process. Take it away, Alex.
Well, thanks, Kirby. Now, I've enabled video for my section of the presentation just because I think it'll be entertaining. I was out scrambling, dealing with a vehicle recall update for my Hyundai Kona electric car, and I had to do a bit of the running around on my bike. So my hair looks like somebody who's been cycling, and my eyes look like somebody who's been cycling. So I thought that might be funny. So just to move on to the next slide, I'd like to outline our approach as Our Energy Guelph consists of two elements, left brain and right brain. And so left brain is really the technical changes in our built environment, in our transportation system, our energy system, and so forth, that will bring us to a net zero carbon future. Along with that is the capital financing that will get us there. On the right brain side of things is public support, and that takes shape in a number of different ways, as well as changing habits. So on the public support side of things, we want to make sure that people are politically aware of what we're doing, so that when there are political decisions to be made, that they will be supportive of them and that elected officials will know that. We also want them to participate in our programs, programs like PACE or Property Assessed Clean Energy. And finally, we want them to participate financially. And sort of dead center in this slide, you see LCB Guelph Fund. LCB stands for Local Climate Bank. And that is a fund that we are going to be creating that will allow individuals to invest in our pathway to net zero carbon. I'm going to just do a quick sidebar note here that we were a bit surprised when we hired a consultant to tell us what our pathway to net zero carbon would look like. I think, like most people, we thought it was going to require massive amounts of public funds, and that would have to be diverted from existing programming or raised through new borrowing or additional taxes. As it turns out, our pathway to net zero carbon is an exciting financial opportunity. It offers a 9% internal rate of return. The $3.2 billion we'll have to invest over the first 30 years of the program, will bring $4.9 billion in direct economic benefits. So the net present value is $1.7 billion. So it would be a great story financially, even if climate change weren't a thing. So that's a story we've been telling very vigorously in the community. So among our technical actions, as I mentioned, they break down into changing our approach to new buildings. So that includes shooting for net zero. And we've been working with the Canadian Home Building Association Net Zero Council on that, as well as local builders. It also involves shooting for the fence for existing buildings and trying to get them as close to net zero as possible through retrofits. It also includes our energy system, and that includes the way that we use energy in our buildings, as well as the way we move energy around, whether we're talking about thermal energy or electricity, That includes district energy, moving forward with microgrid technology and so forth. And then transportation. And that really consists of electrifying transportation and moving away from internal combustion engine vehicles, as well as getting more people walking and biking as possible. And so I'm a bit of a case study there. As far as capital financing goes, I'll delve into that in a little bit more detail on a subsequent slide. I will point out that two of the major initiatives that we're driving forward to start. One is property assessed clean energy, and I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with that, but I'll provide a bit more detail on that, as well as community energy projects. And these include things like converting our composting plant over to anaerobic digestion to produce renewable natural gas. Over on the right brain side of things, though, there are really 4 areas that we are doing engagement. Well, I guess 3. The first is engaging with youth. And you can see some examples. We have a mentoring program that University of Guelph students are running called My World, My Choice. We have a sort of activist training, well, activist training is maybe not the right way of putting it, but a program called Youth Action on Climate Change that is helping youth to acquire the skills necessary to get into the boardroom instead of being outside waving placards. Planet Protector Academy is targeted at younger kids in the elementary school levels. And community events help bring the general public together around climate change issues. We're also running a number of programs related to business. That includes primarily the Guelph Energy Managers program in 3 different flavors. Guelph Energy Managers is modeled after programs that you may be familiar with. The Association of Energy Engineers has a number of local chapters, and we run our program very similarly to the way that they run theirs. Another example is Partners in Project Green in the geographical vicinity of Pearson Airport. Again, similar approach. It's convening a community practice of people who have energy and environment management responsibilities at the largest local employers, bringing them together to share their success stories, as well as what doesn't work, and to help up our game across the board. And we're also looking to partner with Green Economy Canada to create a hub here in Guelph. That program originated next door in Kitchener-Waterloo with the Sustainable Waterloo region. So we're looking to bring that here. And we're also looking to tweak that program to make it suitable for smaller businesses. And then we're also looking at engaging with Random Acts of Green, which is a mobile device app and online community, to bring both business and the general public together around a mobile device app that helps people to do sustainable acts and earn points that they can exchange for discounts at local businesses. I will also point out on the right brain side of things is that we partner with a local not-for-profit called Emerge Guelph, and they have really done some very successful things with engaging with individuals and households, both through their home tune-up program, which provides sort of a light energy audit and retrofit approach, as well as their engagement on electric vehicle adoption. So we've really left the individual and household engagement to them, and we partner with them in that effort. Kirby, if you could advance the slide, please. So one of the major questions that we have to answer is, are we going to start from scratch with our implementation approach, or are we going to partner with entities that have already demonstrated success? And I will just point out that there have been some, this also relates to the inside out versus outside in question with municipal involvement. So in the early days in Guelph, the way that community energy was approached was through really city hall staff. That made it very difficult to communicate to the general public because you were kind of under this cone of silence and having to go through a political filter with virtually every communication that you wanted to do. And part of that was because this became a bit of a political hot button issue, and that made it essentially political whenever our community energy initiative folks wanted to say anything. So that was rather dysfunctional. Another area we experienced some issues, particularly on Guelph Energy Managers, as I mentioned before, is that when you're going out and engaging with a business and looking to bring them into the fold of a community practice, all of a sudden you find yourself engaging in all kinds of conversations about you know, the Guelph transit schedule doesn't work for us, and we've got this issue over here with water costs, and you know, bylaw enforcement isn't playing nice with us. All this sort of baggage that really has nothing to do with community energy, but winds up being part of the conversation because you're coming from the city. If instead you're distinct from the city, then you can get past all that and you can dive right into the value-added conversations that go with that community of practice for energy managers. Another question is attracting investment without dealing with issues like, for example, municipal debt limits. And there's a whole conversation that you wind up getting into when you're looking to finance community energy activities and projects. As a third party, we don't have to worry quite so much about that. And that also ties into being able to engage in the long term for partnering and procurement with various entities. So I've pointed out here that you know, our original approach here at Guelph was to create a municipal services corporation and to effectively create a district energy utility and an efficiency utility under that. And I think that was something that our council viewed as being just a little too risky for their taste. So by creating a third party, and that third party then partnering with the best-in-class entities that have the experience and skills to drive this sort of action, it provided the opportunity to de-risk that relationship with the municipality. And some examples that I'll talk about in a moment are our relationship with Pace Atlantic and with Van City Bank. So just to dive in a little bit more on the left brain side of things and the work that we will be doing, we distinguish between residential PACE, or our PACE, which is low rise, and commercial PACE, which consists of initially high-rise residential buildings, but it will eventually also include strip malls and other commercial space, including office buildings, as well as institutional and industrial spaces. But to start, we're focusing on the residential sector, whether it's low-rise or high-rise. And then, as I mentioned as well, there will be opportunities on the sort of shared space front or shared right-of-way spaces, like, for example, district energy and community energy projects like converting our composting facility over to anaerobic digestion, and potentially putting a solar farm on a closed landfill and some other projects we're looking at. So what we've aimed to do with our approach here is to provide the opportunity for the municipality to take as large or as small a role as it wants. And in our case, the municipality wanted to take a minimal role. So as an example of what that might look like for a residential PACE program, what we're seeing in a lot of other communities is creating a city department or augmenting an existing city department to run this program and adding staff and effectively running it as a city department or as a city enterprise. We're taking a different approach where, again, we're a third party. The municipality still has a role to play, but ultimately that role consists of registering the PACE lien on the property. And just to explain what that's about, Property Assessed Clean Energy originated in the US, and it is a program that allows the financing for an energy project to be attached to the property instead of the property owner. So in effect, you pay back that loan for doing an energy project through or via or in connection with property taxes. So by contrast, another approach might be to obtain bank financing. That would involve means testing and bumping up against credit limits and all those kinds of things, which really are the explanation for why that market hasn't taken off. Whereas PACE programming in the US has mobilized $8.5 billion into the renovation and on-site renewable generation market since its inception almost 15 years ago. So another opportunity here is to partner from a sales and marketing perspective, as I mentioned before, with local environmental NGOs that already have programming that's aligned with ours. So to illustrate what that might look like, Emerge Guelph, that I mentioned before, they have a home tune-up program where they'll go in and offer opportunities for homeowners to do some lightweight, low-cost things to reduce their energy bills. And that provides us with a platform to make a follow-on conversation about, well, do you want to take this to the next level? Do you want to go graduate from the 101 program to the 201 program, where you're doing a deep energy retrofit on your property? So in effect, Our Energy Guelph uses their relationship with Emerge as a sales channel for a deeper energy retrofit program. So I'm just moving on to the next slide. So to explain a little bit about the way that we are choosing to fund our programs, it breaks into operating and capital. So as Kirby pointed out, we've received a commitment from the city of $700,000 for the first 5 years of operation. That funds our basic costs, starting at 100% year 1 and declining to 50% by year 5. So we will be ramping up alternative sources of operating funds over that period. And our PACE program, once we reach a threshold of 400 homes a year, assuming that each one is about a $40,000 threshold, we will break even and we will close that gap. We think that that's a reasonable objective over the 4 remaining years that we have by the time we hit that 50,000 or that 50% provision by the city marker. And then there's also the opportunity for us to obtain revenue from other directions, like, for example, charging a convener fee for some of the from the work that we will be doing to drive community energy projects, potentially taking an equity stake, and so forth. So that's where we expect to receive our operating capital or operating funds. And then on the capital side of things, we've applied to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Community Efficiency Financing Program. We will learn in January whether we were successful with that. If we were successful, we will get a $10 million loan and a $5 million grant, which will essentially be the startup capital that we will require for our PACE program. We also partnered with Van City Bank for the portion of capital or financing that is required under FCN rules to be obtained by the local community. And that's where that $3 million loan or line of credit comes in. Over time, though, we expect that we will build up the private capital story. We do not have any intention of looking to the municipality to provide capital. They've already done their bit from our perspective with providing the seed capital and or the startup funding. And we see more than enough opportunity to obtain revenues from the various community energy projects that we'll be doing, which when we hit steady state should be somewhere around $100 million worth of investment per year. And that investment will be obtained through some mix of institutional investors, as well as the LCB fund, which I mentioned before. So the sorts of institutional investors that we expect to talk to, we already have a conversation going with one very significant financing opportunity, a particular investor that is really interested in financing pretty much our entire program. But we also want to augment that with funds from the local community. And part of that is because of the economic story that we've been telling, which is $500 million a year goes to energy costs in our community, and most of that money leaves town and never comes back. So we want to cut that figure in half through efficiency and spend as much as possible of what's left in the local community. So it would be inconsistent with that story to bring in a whole bunch of capital from outside of town and then watch the returns on that capital leave town. So we want to make sure we're striking a balance, that we are opening the door for members of the local community to make investments. And so that's what the local climate bank fund is about. So the idea here is that a member of the local community could say, okay, I'd like to make an investment in this vehicle. Maybe they go to a local credit union, and that's where they can, that's the storefront where they can make this commitment. They put an investment on the table through that bank, through that fund, ideally through an RRSP eligible vehicle. The LCB fund then takes that capital and allocates it to the sorts of projects that I mentioned, whether those are PACE projects or community energy projects. And those funds produce a financial return, and that goes back to the initial investor. So how might you set up your own version of Our Energy Guelph? Well, this is really just talking about our story. And by no means is this linear. By no means would we suggest that this is the only way to do it. This is our story. Yours may look very, very different if you choose to go the same approach or use the same approach that we did. As Kirby pointed out, it started off with charting the course by setting a goal of net zero carbon by 2050, and then figuring out what our pathway to achieve that goal would look like. Next, we laid the foundation by incorporating as not-for-profit, establishing a community-based board of directors, and then setting our budget. And those were the three criteria. As Kirby pointed out, the council motion specified that they were agreeing in principle. They wanted to make sure that we had these three things in place before they would really cement that deal. And once we did, they signed the agreement and the funding started to flow. So we're in the process now of the third stage launch. We've partnered with Pace Atlantic. This is really the only entity in Canada that is offering a comprehensive solution for PACE programming as a third party. So we chose to partner with them rather than starting from scratch with our own initiative. We're also, again, partnering with Van City Bank from private capital perspective, and partnering with FCM ideally for public sector funding, and with other entities like the Clean Air Partnership and Quest and so forth to help drive our programming. And we hope to launch our PACE program early in 2021, and also move forward with some of the other community energy projects that we have in mind. And then eventually we will transition completely to external, from external to local capital, and also wean ourselves off of any remaining public sector capital, and then build on our initial program successes. So I would like to turn it back to Kirby for concluding remarks.
Yeah, well, we'll leave this slide hanging. Hopefully it provides a focal point for some conversation. At this point, we will open it up to questions. But before we do that, just one brief suggestion. If those of you who are working for the intermediary, the kind of intermediary that we've described here, locally based, community based, and or know of an example of one, please feel free to drop the example in the chat box, because I think that it'd certainly be helpful for us to know of other examples. We're aware of some, but surely we're unaware of others. And I think it would be helpful for the audience as well to see a list of other examples. So if you could put that example in the chat box, separate from the Q&A, so that we can separate those suggestions from the questions that come in, that would be wonderful. Otherwise, happy to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Kirby and Alex. And yeah, just there's a Q&A box or a chat box if you want to drop any questions you may have in there. We will hopefully be able to answer them for you. And in the meantime, I just want to, we got a few questions rolling in now. So a first question for both you, Kirby and Alex. So are there staff from the city of Guelph who are directly involved in the community energy aspects still, or are they fully removed now that OEG is in existence?
Well, I can speak to that. So the short answer is yes, there are, but maybe from a distance, and maybe not to the extent that we might prefer. So as an example, we do have a board of directors seat that is reserved from the city. So that is held by the general manager of facilities management and energy. That was actually a temporary arrangement because originally it was the general manager of business development enterprise, basically our terminology for economic development, that was holding that seat. And then there was turnover in that role, so they switched it over temporarily to the facilities management fellow. So that facilities management role is where the climate change office used to reside when I was still with the city. They do have a manager of corporate energy and climate change still in that role, but we are still working with the city to ramp up and clarify the nature of the role that the city will have on those community energy projects.
Yeah, and I'll just add very quickly, it's a critical question. And what we certainly don't want to suggest that with Our Energy Guelph, this allows the municipality to outsource all things community energy. What we're suggesting is a partnership that can help them to overcome limits of their institutional capacity. But I think what we've seen is that staff see this as an opportunity to outsource, unfortunately. And what we need in place is, and what needs to be in place, even with the development of these intermediaries, is some liaison beyond the board seat that we've got set up, some sort of storefront within the municipality where we can go as a community organization and get support to and have an internal champion on some of the initiatives that we want to pursue.
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much for that response. Another question coming in, talking about external financing partners. Was it easier, do you think, in your guys' opinion, to obtain that external financing, like your partnership with Van City Investment Bank, because you're a separate nonprofit versus being directly from the municipality?
I'll take the first shot at this one. So thanks for your question, Emma. I think that the short answer is it's hard to tell. I think that there's an awful lot of baggage that comes along in conversations about financing when you're with a municipality, and part of that is internal. So hard questions about municipal debt limits, and if we're obtaining external financing, will that affect debt limits? And also a lot of questions about looking for clarity on, is this just a temporary thing and you're going to be looking to draw on city reserves somewhere in the future? And just there's just a lot of sort of internal headwind, I guess I would say, to obtaining the necessary capital to drive forward with these projects. By contrast, we really just had to pitch to Van City. This is what our program looks like. This is what PACE programming is all about. Ultimately, the risk that you're buying as an investor is the municipal property tax default rate, because it's tied directly to that. And in fact, if you look at the history out of the States, and I think the same story is true in the two biggest PACE programs in Canada, which are in Toronto and in Halifax, properties with a PACE loan actually have a lower default rate than the average. And they also command a resale premium in the marketplace above and beyond the value of the PACE loan. So for that reason, it should be extremely attractive to external investors to get on board with this, because in effect, they get something that is not that much different in risk profile from a municipal bond, in fact, possibly even lower risk. So certainly the conversation we had with Van City was they're interested in providing capital to bridge that kind of valley of death from initial concept to commercialization. So that's extremely welcome, and they see PACE in particular as being a great financing opportunity.
Excellent answer. Yes, thank you, Alex. So another question, and this is a good one because I know at Quest it is something we do come across from time to time. Is this model something that could be replicated in communities where climate change or energy transitions aren't really a priority? This was implemented in a community, this particular case where you had that kind of top-down buy-in. How is this something that could be developed or sold in a place that climate skepticism or it's just not a priority is a thing? Is that possible?
Well, again, Kirby, I'll let you chime in if I miss anything. But I think the short answer here is definitely, and the reason is Guelph is not a land of rainbows and unicorns where the laws of physics and the laws of economics are different from everywhere else on the planet. I think that our story of our pathway to net zero carbon and the very profitable financials of it will remain true in virtually any community you care to name, and ultimately that drives the conversation. Because if we can walk into a community and say, all we're really looking for from you is not as a council, as a municipal council, is not a financial commitment, but really effectively just offering us the license, for lack of a better word, to operate in your community. especially if we have the seed capital already at our backs, we can start that transition in that community without the need for any more involvement from the municipality other than giving us that license. And then, obviously doing some of the other sorts of things that Kirby pointed out that are the municipal role, like, for example, the local improvement charges mechanism for PACE programming, and also the role that the municipality has around potentially serving as an anchor tenant for a district energy system, and also the fact that they own the right of way where the district energy piping is likely to run, and then also the urban planning component around densification and walkable communities and all those sorts of things that will help ensure that in growing communities that are adding square footage of building space, that that square footage is being designed in a sustainable way. So I think that there is a huge opportunity there for walking in with a story of building prosperity, not borrowing money, and not adding something to and adding a burden to the tax base, but instead just rolling forward with something that is an exciting economic opportunity that happens to also drive climate change mitigation and adaptation.
Yeah, I'll just add very quickly, because I think this next question here from Jamie is an important one as well. That it really depends on the nature of that climate skepticism or of the lack of action. And in many cases, it revolves around risk aversion and the unwillingness to, for lack of a better phrase, saddle the taxpayer with the financial burden of that action. And so to Alex's point, what a model like Our Energy Guelph enables is one that supports profound transformative action without the risk of exposing the taxpayer to the risk. But I would still go back to the potential of this model to also blur the lines of accountability and at the same time also make it easier for a municipality to claim action without doing the hard work, without implementing those policies and implementing those regulations. So we need to just be very vigilant in making sure that the municipality still plays its role.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much for those responses. So we have a couple more questions here, so we'll try to fit them in before we're done our session for today. So a quick question around, so between conception to incorporation on the timeline for OEG, was about a 13-year timeline. So how did you guys exist before that? Like, it was just a group, or was it an alliance, or like, how did you exist in that time before the legal incorporation? If you could just speak to that briefly and how it functioned.
Yeah, I'll actually say, so Our Energy Guelph really started in 2016. So prior to that, the community energy plan was housed within City Hall, and it was primarily the responsibility of a division within City Hall. And then in 2016, when the update happened, like most other community energy planning updates, the city struck a task force to advise them on what that update would look like. And that was really the beginning of what we came to call Our Energy Guelph, was in 2016. And so we went from a task force that was advising the municipality. We rebranded ourselves as Our Energy Guelph and stated our intention to partner. We incorporated and developed what we call the Transition Board of Directors. So the Transition Board of Directors was a few members of that original task force who were involved in setting up the bylaws, who were involved in setting up the governance framework and the structure. And then that Transition Board of Directors recruited a full-time board of directors. And so there was about a 3-year period from the time Our Energy Guelph was branded in name and when Our Energy Guelph held its first official board meeting with its permanent full-time board of directors. And in the meantime, we had a transitional board that was setting up some of the infrastructure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that clarification, Kirby. Another question quickly regarding the PACE work. So in the era of cheap money through home equity line of credits, are you considering targeting this to more lower income homeowners or new homeowners with limited equity?
I can speak to that. So I think the short answer is we're going to target where we think that the market is most fertile, there's some very, very helpful tools that are available for this, and we're looking to maybe imitate some of the things that, like Kingston, for example, is doing around a tool called LightSpark, which can help identify where the most economically advantageous areas of our community and market segments in the community are going to be. As far as the cheap home equity line of credit story, yeah, that's certainly going to be, for lack of a better term, a competing product, but people aren't using it. So there's got to be a reason for that. And I think that part of the reason is people don't want to have the impact on their personal credit rating that goes with that. So I don't see people lining up to get a home equity line of credit for the purposes of doing a home energy retrofit project. And there are also other advantages to PACE financing that home equity lines of credit don't have. Like, for example, the fact that if the property is sold and the buyer doesn't specifically request it to be retired, it automatically transfers to that new owner, to that buyer. And that's a big win from a de-risking perspective from the individual property owner, because they don't then have to worry about ensuring that gets paid out if they then choose to sell the property. But there is definitely a story there to be told about equity and about energy poverty, and that's part of the reason that we're going after multi-unit residential as an early priority, because that's where you typically find the folks that have to make that choice between do I heat or do I eat.
And I'll also say very quickly that we see the PACE program and the LIC mechanism as one tool, one financing tool among many that can drive home energy retrofits. And we want to develop a program around the LIC mechanism because we think that it will open up a particular segment of the market to home energy retrofits. But at the same time, we're indiscriminate in the tools that we would use, right? So Our Energy Guelph's mission is to ensure that homes are retrofitted. And so in any case, regardless of the financing option, there's still a need for an entity out in the community to convene, to organize, to communicate, to be a trusted source of information. And thinking of REAP Green Solutions in Waterloo Region as an example of that. So we will always continue to play that role. And in addition to that, we hope to set up this program around LICs because it will open up a market that is currently not opened as a function of the way that existing financing tools function.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys both for those very, very thoughtful answers. So we're out of time for today. There was a question or two that we weren't able to get to, but I will be reaching out and we'll follow up with people who asked it individually after. I want to once again thank everybody for taking the time to attend today, as well as extend our thanks to both Kirby and Alex for such a great and thoughtful and very, very informative presentation. I know we all took a lot away from it, which is great. And then one final reminder, this was part 3 of a 4-part series. So part 4 of our webinar series is happening on December 9th. At 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And that one will be focusing on a protocol to guide municipalities to accelerate the implementation of renewable energy. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and I look forward to seeing you all on December 9th.
Thanks everybody.